Okay. Number 2B. Number 2B. It says analyze. Why is freedom of speech so important to a democratic society? Okay, with Lorenzo.
Like without freedom of speech, there wouldn't be a democratic society because a democratic society runs on the will of the people.
All right, and how would free speech show the will of the people?
Because freedom of speech is like you're allowed to kind of like elaborate, not so much elaborate, but talk about or express out loud what you feel.
Your ideas. Okay, that's a very interesting point. Yes.
And also, since it's democratic, like the people do like speeches and stuff so for their vote, so then that helps too.
Okay, perhaps Ricky.
Also, like, because when you vote, you have to say what you feel. Like, you have to say who is the best person for you to run.
Okay, so you give your opinion. Okay, anybody else? This is how I would put it. Imagine that there is no one truth. In other words, there is no specific right or wrong in government. And in governments that don't have freedom of speech, the right of the people in power is basically the truth of that society. Because nobody else can express anything. But in a country where there's freedom of speech and people are freely allowed to express their opinions, when they do that, the truth of the majority comes out. Because now they can exchange ideas. Those ideas can be changed by the fact that there is an exchange taking place. So sometimes you believe one thing. For example, when you were very small, you believed in that the boogeyman was in the dark, so you didn't want the light to be on, and your parents talked to you about it, and they sat with you, and they said, the only thing that's different in this room is that the lights are off, and over time, that your original idea changes, and you're no longer afraid of the dark because you accepted your parents' truth. So in the exchange and interchange of ideas, we can find a meeting ground or a middle point where the majority agrees on what the truth is. Okay? And democracies run on that exposition of ideas, okay? On that interchange of ideas. So government allowing it allows the majority's truth to become the truth of the people. Okay? Is the majority's truth always the actual truth? Can anybody give me an example where the majority's truth is not the actual truth?
The president?
What was happening in Nazi Germany? Nazi Germany was a dictatorship and Hitler told them what to do. But do you think that during World War II, the majority of Germans, I'm not talking about Jews, the majority of Germans bought into what Hitler was preaching?
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
yes. Absolutely. They would show up, they would almost worship him. And that was the majority's truth. Was it the ultimate truth?
No.
So sometimes the majority truth is not always the absolute truth. But in an exchange of ideas, generally when we can exchange those freely without worrying that the government is going to do something against us, we can ultimately find that meeting, that level where everybody's willing to agree. All right, let's continue. 2C, evaluate. Which First Amendment freedom do you think is the most important? This is a value judgment. Yes?
I believe freedom of speech is important, or else we couldn't express our ideas or we couldn't express ourselves. And many of the times we have to elaborate on things and our opinions on specific topics, and without we couldn't run a government.
Okay, yes?
I think that all the freedoms in the First Amendment fall under one freedom, which I think is the most important, the freedom of expression.
Okay. So what you're saying is not any specific one in the First Amendment. You would say that the whole bundle of freedoms in the First Amendment. But we're looking for one, and I think that that's, you're saying if you had to choose, you'd choose that one. Anybody choose any other? Yes.
I chose freedom of religion because
Okay.
I believe everybody should be entitled to their own beliefs.
Okay.
Nobody has to tell you what you can believe in.
Okay. Yes, Ricky. Ricky's hot today. He's volunteering for everything. I'm very proud of him today.
I think freedom of press is good because I think it's good that the people should know what's going on in the government. Like if something's bad happening, they should know. Something good happening, they should know.
Well, could you please sit down? Okay. Ricky points to freedom of the press, and even though he's sitting there and he doesn't know this, Thomas Jefferson, who's the author of the Declaration of Independence, once said that if he had a choice between a government and no press, or a press and no government, he would choose the latter. He would choose the ability for the press to be able to be free and to be able to communicate what is happening. Because if you think about it, we don't have the ability to really learn about what's going or what's happening in the distance. Why? Because we don't live in China, we don't live in Russia, we don't live in Iraq and Iran, in those places. So we need, especially in today's world, right? It used to be that did it matter to the Native Americans what was happening with the Romans? Could care less. Could care less. They didn't even need to know that Romans existed for their day-to-day lives. It didn't impact them at all. But today, does it impact us? What is happening to the price of the ruble in the world economy? Ruble is the currency, the Russian currency. Does it matter to us?
Yeah.
Absolutely, because by the ruble going down, because they're an oil exporting country, price of gasoline goes down. Exactly, that's how I feel. And I'm surprised that someone so young that doesn't have to pay for it feels the same way, but I congratulate you. So today, what is happening very far away from our ability to personally learn about affects us directly. Affects us directly. And therefore, the press is very important. I'm not saying that it would be my preferential right.
What would be your preference?
How much is gas?
280 something.
It dropped.
280
It dropped.
But let's go back. Let's go back to the original question. Mr. Brano, Eddie. Okay, focus. Let's go back to the original question, which is what I think is the most important. And again, it's a value judgment. And my value judgment would probably run around freedom of speech. Because without free speech, you can't have free press. Right? Because isn't free press just an extension of free speech?
Yeah, everything is on the freedom of speech because if you don't have freedom of religion, then you have freedom of speech. Aren't you able to express it?
I think Valentina put it best when she says that all of these rights are interconnected. You really can't have one without the other. They all stem, and I think that this is what Ryan was trying to tell us, they all stem from the same thing, which is expression. And if you're missing one of the points on the star, you really don't have a star. You just have some weird thing. So, but again, each of these rights are individually very important by themselves. All right. And to a certain extent, can't you have freedom of all of the other freedoms without freedom of religion? That's really a good question, because there are countries that still propose a state-run religion. For example, if you go to Spain, it's still a Catholic country. If you go to England, they still have the Church of England. They don't force it upon you, but that's the official church of the state. So, without freedom of religion, maybe, perhaps today it's a little different, but I still go with the fact that you need all of them in order to be able to fully express yourself. All right. 3A. Write a brief definition of the terms self-incrimination, due process of law, eminent domain, and bail. Let's start one at a time. Self-incrimination, chump.
Is the act of exposing oneself.
Act of exposing oneself. There is so much we can do with that. But what does that mean?
It means it's like when you plead the fifth, right?
What does it really mean? I know it's when you plead the fifth because right against self-incrimination is found in the Fifth Amendment. But what does it mean? Yes, Ed.
Testify? Okay.
It has to do with testimony, but more
Against
than
the-
just that.
the-
Yes,
like the
Mr.
Fifth
Brown.
Amendment of a Christian.
When you're not gonna testify, that's in court, so it protects you from.
Okay, it does relate to court to a certain extent, but it also relates to interrogations of individual accused of crimes, right? People arrested.
Room by yourself, and then they bring you coffee.
Read.
To involve yourself in a criminal prosecution, so that you're not involved in.
Ryan, since you're having personal discussion of these rights on your own with Ricky and Ruben, could you please tell me what is the meaning of self-incrimination? How would it apply? You were doing so well in the past few days.
What happened?
Everybody's entitled to a bad day, right? Ruben,
Bad thing.
no, this can't be your worst day. You have no clue what right against self-incrimination. Ruben, let me explain it to you because it may become helpful for you someday.
It means tomorrow.
It means that when you are confronted by a government official, and it could be a police officer, it could be anybody that works for the government, that you are asked whether or not you did something, you have the right to say, I refuse to answer your question under my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. So they can't force you to give testimony against yourself. That's one aspect of it. And part of the reason that that's one aspect of it is because before, you've all heard the third degree, right? Especially the girls, that's what your fathers threaten the boys that are going to come and date you someday. I'm going to give that boy the third degree. Third degree. Well, let's explain. Let me explain because I think that the right against self-incrimination goes this way. Alexander, pay attention. It has to do with police investigation procedures. There was in New York an individual who was in charge of the New York police, and he believed in 3 types of degrees of interrogation. The first degree, Ryan, is persuasion. Listen, Ryan, you're a good boy, man. You've always done the right thing. Do the right thing this time. There are so many people who are going to be affected by what happened. You know you want to do the right thing. Just tell me the truth. That's the first degree. The second degree, threat. Ryan, if you don't tell me the truth, you are going to get in all sorts of trouble. You're going to go to jail for a very long time. You're never going to see the light of day. Okay. Let me finish. Let me finish.
And the last but not least.
Now, the last one, the third degree.
My third.
The third degree was the utilization of violence to extract what I knew that you knew to begin with. Okay? I torture you until you told me what I wanted to hear.
Oh, like in a 21 Jump Street.
So the third degree, and today that your fathers don't really mean that they're going to torture your prospective boyfriends. They're not going. Hopefully, Bree's looking at me and saying, "My daddy is." Okay. When they say the third degree, really what they mean is that they're going to question them and make them feel uncomfortable, but they're not really going to beat them up. But that's what stop. That's what the third degree used to mean. Now, if that's what the third degree used to mean, why why is a confession that is obtained as a consequence of torture good or bad? Yes.